The West assumes that unless you are democratic like them, you have elections every few years and change the president or change the prime minister and the whole parliament, then you cannot make progress. You're always below par. That China never had such a tradition, that China is a vast country of 1.3 billion people with a different culture, a different history, they do not understand.
But you are just one of many other powers. If I were America, Europe, and Japan, I would spend time to make sure that the mindset of the younger generation is not one of hostility, but one of acceptance and an understanding that you are now a stakeholder.
Lee Kuan Yew is one of world's rare statesmen who has met all the Chinese leaders from Mao Zedong to Xi Jinping. Namely Mao Zedong, Deng Xiaoping, Jiang Zemin, Hu Jintao, and Xi Jinping.
And having been to China 32 times, he is a rare statesman whose views on China are much sought after. And what are his views on China? Please watch until the end to find out. If you like this video, please like, share, and subscribe.
The West assumes that unless you are democratic like them, you have elections every few years and change the president or change the prime minister and the whole parliament, then you cannot make progress. You're always below par, subnormal, sub-ideals. That's their preconceived view of the world. That China never had such a tradition, that China is a vast country of 1.3 billion people with a different culture, a different history, they do not understand.
With the end of the Cold War, there has been a sweeping jubilation about the defeat of communism. And therefore, what we got from the book by Francisco Fukuyama is the end of history and the last man. So it seems the Westerners have a full confidence about their multi-party democracy, the liberal market-oriented economy. What's wrong with their prescription for the rise of China, in your opinion?
Well, these are preconceived ideas, theories which they work out. Because the Soviet Union and the East European states have collapsed, it doesn't mean China will follow. Chinese communism is based on Chinese history and China's conditions, which are different from the Soviet Union or Eastern Europe. It is indigenous, it was local or indigenous created. Therefore, I think if I were Chinese, I just ignore them, carry on with what I've been doing, make my people better, make my country stronger, make my country more prosperous. His famous dictum was, white cats, black cats, they catch mice. So it does not matter whether it's white or black, they catch mice. That in a short explanation, a short sentence gives the explanation to his thinking. He's not interested in theories, he's interested in what works. And I think because you had Deng Xiaoping, so he moved China from the Cultural Revolution to stability and progress. If you had not had Deng Xiaoping, I think there would be a very different China. And he came here in November 78. He came to Singapore, I met him. Then he saw a country without natural resources, but relatively prosperous, peaceful, and people contented. And he noticed that we had many investments from outside. Investments bring in foreign markets, foreign technology, and they train our people. to managerial and other jobs. He went back in December and had, I think, 6 or 7 free ports, free economic zones, and they succeeded. As a result, gradually China opened up the whole of China as an economic free zone. When Zhu Rongxi brought China to the World Trade Organization, he in fact made the whole of China a special free trade country, which was a decisive move, the end result of Deng Xiaoping's critical turning point.
China is far bigger in size than Singapore, and yet China seems to stand ready to learn from your successful experiences. In what particular area do you think we can learn from your legacy in running your economy and the society?
When China comes to Singapore to learn specific areas of management, not to learn how we govern our country, because China has its own concepts, its own principles of how it will govern China. But it finds us interesting for the way we have managed to keep the city orderly, to keep the city clean, to keep the people happy with their conditions, everybody with homes, and therefore no anger, no angst, because you can't find a home.
Some people look at China and they say, there's been no Google formed in China. There's been no Facebook developed in China. No Microsoft developed in China. And that says something about their educational system.
Partly the educational system, but partly because there's very tight control at the top. They do not like the established order to be tinkered with. If it's working fine, leave it. And if anybody has something good, we'll borrow it and test it out. Why take the risk? Their attitude is, let's play it safe. If you let 1.3 billion smart guys experimenting, you'll have near chaos. And they're capable of thinking up new things. I'll give you an example. I go on the computer for translations now into Chinese and vice versa.
Yes.
And it's all done free. The Chinese have done it. It's called N-Ciku.
N-Ciku.
Ciku is a reservoir, Ciku. And you can do wonders with it. And there are many such things. You can, anything you want to do on the internet, there's no need to go to Google. You can go to Baidu and do
Baidu is a Chinese search engine.
Yeah.
It's a large one, too. They own 60, 70% of the Chinese market.
That's right.
What did you think of what the Chinese did to Google?
Well, they didn't want Google to become a vehicle for subversion, what they called subversion, the spreading of ideas inimical to the stability of the state.
Do you think they're too paranoid?
Chinese fear of any government is luan, it means chaos.
Yes.
It's a huge country, and you cannot control everything. You cannot micro-control it, so you just say, stop it.
But just seeing China on 32 different visits over the last, since 1976, that's about 33 years, I would say it's been a remarkable transformation. The China I visited in 1976 was dilapidated, down, gray, drab, everybody in the same mouth jackets, unlit streets. I was put up in the best hotel in Shanghai. I went down at night after dinner to see what it's like, and dark streets, unlighted shops, and whole streams of people. So you've got to keep on moving, otherwise They're holding everybody up. Overcrowded. Now you go to Shanghai, unbelievably, just widen the roads, they've greened up the place, huge, tremendous improvements in their infrastructure. So that's coastal China, and you can find that in Guangzhou, Dalian, Tianjin, all the coastal cities. I've also been to the interior. I've been to Lanzhou to see the caves in Dunhuang. And it was an arid place. It's got oil, and the oil has got to be shared with 1.3 billion people. So if Lanzhou were just looking after itself with its 40 million, it might be quite a wealthy little oil state, but it's not as. So, what is the real China? I think there are multiple real Chinas, depending, even within a province. But given the diversity of the country, the progress is made is quite outstanding. Can it have a peaceful rise? Quite possible. For 20, 30, 40 years. Will it be peaceful after it has risen? I cannot say. Because, you know, every year since 1976, the relationship of China between Singapore and China, yes, it's good, it's friendly, but in 76, they were asking me questions about the free market, about many things. Now we are talking at a different level. I'm talking to people who read enormously and been briefed. So we are talking at a different level, and the relationship is at a more realistic level. You can't ask me with 4 million people to give advice to 1.3 billion people. I don't think it's wise anyway of me, and I'll cease to be friends if I do that. But I'll say what I think is good about China and a few things about what will hold it up. One, they've got the system going. When they say we will do this, it's done.
Deng Xiaoping is a great man. He fought a great revolution. He saw the product of that revolution turn sour. He was fortunate to live long enough, and he had the courage to say, no, we change course. Let's learn. Let's stop trying to do everything by ourselves. So they started importing and buying Boeing 707s. So they bought Tridents instead of trying to manufacture their own aircraft. Eventually they will, but it will take 2, maybe 3 generations.
Peaceful rise, it is in China's interest to grow in a peaceful environment. If you are engaged in wars or conflicts, you won't grow. I mean, you see Vietnam. From 1945 to 1991, they were engaged in a series of wars. Nearly broke them. Now they are recovering. It took a long time. And the Chinese know this. This generation has been through hell. Great leap forward, hunger, starvation, near collision with the Russians over the Amur River, Cultural Revolution, gone mad. So they said, okay, we've got a chance now to join the other countries at the top. Let's not disturb this opportunity. So hence this concept of peaceful rise. I met the party school vice principal. He asked me to speak to the students once. So I said, you know, if I were you, I would not use the word peaceful rise in English. It sounds all right in Chinese, 崛起, but in English it means you're rising, it's like a mushroom, you know, you scare people. Why not say cultural renaissance, that you are going back to Tang Dynasty or Sung Dynasty or Han Dynasty, a restoration of your cultural efflorescence. That will make people concentrate on the cultural side. So they now settle for peaceful development. I say they've moved away from peaceful rise. I have no doubts that they will have they want a peaceful rise. This generation. But the grandchildren may think that they have already arrived, and then they begin to flex their muscles, and then you will have a very different China. So I put this question to them. They said, no, it won't happen. We'll tell them. Teach them all the lessons. You know, the grandchildren never listen to grandfathers. So that's one problem. The other problem is a more crucial one. If you start off in the belief that the world has been unkind to you, that the world has exploited you, that the imperialists have devastated you, you know, looted Beijing, done all this to you. One day you get at the top table, you'll square accounts. Well, that's no good. I think you must get a generation to grow up and say, look, you're not going back to old China when you were just the only power in the world, as far as you know. Rome was far away. And the Silk Road, well, you can't invade each other. But you are now going to grow, let's say in 50 years, with an economy, total GDP more than America, easily more than Japan, but per capita still low. But you are just one of many other powers, many of them more innovative, more inventive, more resilient in meeting with changes in technology and changes in social lives and so on. So I tell my American friends, if I were you, I wouldn't worry about them today, you know, democracy and so on. Leave it to them. You've got tens of thousands of bright Chinese students in America. You give them a bad impression, a bad time, they'll go home nursing a grievance. You accept them as friends and say, look, this is one world, global warming. We will be in trouble, you will be in trouble. AIDS, terrorism, chemical weapons, nuclear weapons. It's a different world. China will not be the sole power. But sometimes, I'm not talking about people at the top, I think they understand this, but the people at the bottom, middle ranges, it is still in the formative stage. And if I were America, Europe, and Japan, I would spend time to make sure that the mindset of the younger generation is not one of hostility, but one of acceptance and an understanding that you are now a stakeholder, which was Bob Zweig's very apt description of their role. When they were called a stakeholder, they asked me, what is a stakeholder? I said, it means you got a stake in it, and if it goes down, you will lose money. So after some time, they said, yeah, that's right. So stakeholders are a good idea. So make them feel they're stakeholders, and if this earth goes warm, they're in as much trouble as anybody else.